We're looking particularly at the recent case of Asia Bibi, a Christian woman sentenced to death in Pakistan for allegedly blaspheming the Prophet Muhammad. It's raised the whole issue of blasphemy law under Islam. And today on the show, John Joseph joins me. He's a Christian human rights activist who has supported Christians charged with blasphemy in court cases in Pakistan. He now resides in the UK after an attempt on his own life. Stuart Windsor is also with me, the Director of Christian Solidarity Worldwide, who support persecuted Christians around the world. On the Muslim side today, Adnan Rashid, a regular contributor to this programme. He's a Muslim speaker and apologist with the Hittin Institute, and we're going to be finding out his views in the whole area of blasphemy law, what the Quran has to say about it, whether Islam is ultimately compatible with freedom of expression, freedom to insult even, and we'll get into some of the distinctions of those a little bit later on in the show. So welcome along, gentlemen all. It's great to have you with me. We have an incredibly full studio, actually. We've sort of got an entourage as well. This is being filmed and we've got a couple of onlookers. So it feels like a live studio debate today. But thank you for joining me today. Perhaps we'll turn first of all to two people who are very new to the show, never been on before. Those are John Joseph and Stuart Windsor. But Stuart, you're a great friend of Premier because you've obviously been presenting the show Voice for the Voiceless for many years, highlighting the plight of persecuted Christians around the world. I mean, how often do you deal with Islam in some sense or another in the issues you're talking about?
Can I just say two things first, Justin? Your introduction was brilliant.
But wrong somehow.
No, not wrong, no. And Christian Solidarity is unlike most Christian charities in that we're an advocacy organisation. And just for Adnan and those listening, we do not proselytise.
No.
Because it conflicts with advocacy. That's the first thing. And so we're very clear on our mandate of being a voice for the voiceless, mainly Christians, but others as well. And so we not only help Christians who suffer under unjust laws around the world, but others as well, including Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, those that have been suffering under regimes that we would deem as evil. And so I'd like to make that clear. Now, in terms of my work, it does actually interface, and our work does interface with Muslim extremism, Islamic extremism around the world. For instance, not only in Pakistan, but in the Middle East, in Indonesia, even in China. You know, we're looking at Xinjiang in the northwest part of China, where the Uyghurs are mainly a Muslim tribe. And so we deal a lot with Islam and interface with it in terms of misuse, really.
One of the things that's been making the headlines, of course, recently is the case of Asia Bibi, this Christian woman sentenced to death in Pakistan. What has made this case particularly pertinent of late?
Well, first of all, Asia comes... there have been a long line of blasphemy cases in Pakistan. For 100 years, probably only one case of blasphemy in the subcontinent, India, and then Pakistan as a country was formed. And then General Zia al-Haq Islamized the constitution. He brought in a code, PPC 295. Well, PPC 295A is actually a Sharia law that's enshrined in the Pakistan Penal Code that deals with insulting the Islamic religion. PPC 295B is the desecration of a holy book like a Bible or a Quran. And then PPC 295C is blasphemy against the Prophet Muhammad. He brought those two codes in at separate times in 80. We believe not because of the issue of Islam, but for political and ideological reasons. He wanted people to the Muslim vote. And so for us, watching and observing Pakistan, we believe the constitution was Islamized for the wrong reasons. And of course, the other thing we could say is this: there have been more blasphemy cases against Muslims than Christians. In fact, 50% of all the cases, and we know are between 900 to 1,000, have actually been taken against Muslims, not Christians.
Well, turning to the case of Asia Bibi, what do you know of this, John? Have you been following the details of this case as it's emerged?
No, I don't know a lot of details about the Asia Bibi, but I have got experience in my life because I'm working there a long time, from the 86 to 95 for the human rights. So I've got a lot of experience because I'll go to every time in the courts. I'll go to and meet to that peoples, and I know what's the reality for that cases.
And what is the reality usually for these blasphemy cases? Is there a charge to be heard normally, or are these very often non-existent sort of?
But if you
charges?
check all the cases from Zalhaq to now, have got a lot of cases, lot of cases. Not just for the Christians, not for the Muslim. It's a Hindu, it's Sikhs, lot of people involved in these cases. But all the cases, when it's go to the High Court, Supreme Court, cases go to finish because no any reality there.
So these cases are usually overturned because
just
there's
if you have got any
evidence.
problem with your neighbor, any problem with your any big leader, so he may make case for you, and you go to in the jail.
So these are often actually personal vendettas that are being
Actually, it's
settled.
going to misuse.
Yes, and we could say, first of all, the case against Asia is this, that she was charged in 2009. Actually, she was working in fields with other women, and she drew water from a well, and she was the Muslim women accused her of making the water dirty, making the water unclean, I presume because she was a Christian, and then later they alleged that she had blasphemed the Prophet Muhammad. But most of the cases, as John said, that come to the court, there's never any factual evidence. And we've done a check, and we can't substantiate this, but from the people we know in Pakistan, we've been told that very, very few Muslims, the government have actually not executed, or very few people have been executed as a result of being found guilty of the charge. Most are discharged, or the cases are dropped, or the accused languish in prison for many years because the cases don't come to court.
But there is the problem that that person may not then be free, in the sense
Well, they won't be free.
that the extremist will be out possibly.
They won't be free. This woman's life is now ended in Pakistan. If we take the case that John was involved in, even John was a witness to 3 Christians who were charged with blasphemy in Gunjanawala in 1993. There was a boy aged 12, a Salamat Masi, a farmer, Raymat Masi, and then the boy's uncle went down to the police station in Gunjanawala to intervene on his nephew's behalf. They had been accused of scribbling blasphemies on the mosque wall in Gunjanawala by the 2 Malvanis. Actually, they were both illiterate. They could not read or write. And when the boy's uncle intervened, he was charged too. When they finally came to the High Court in Lahore, the judge refused to hear the charges because he said, rightly so, in a country like Pakistan, that would have been an offence to Muhammad. And so he sent them away, and John was only a witness to that. He wasn't charged.
Right.
But yet, Manzoor Masi was shot dead outside the High Court by the mullahs who had made the accusation. And John then had to stay to give evidence against, because he clearly saw the perpetrators of those who shot
and
Manzoor
obviously
dead.
that itself developed into it.
He could not stay in Pakistan then, and we had to
I
him.
what do you see the situation as out there, John, in Pakistan? And we'll come to Adnan in a moment for his reflection on this. But is it a case of a sort of extremist groupings within Pakistan who are kind of at odds with the way the government would like Islamic law to be understood there? And do you see a lot of this kind of them taking it into their own hands? I mean, you yourself were shot at, and I think you even have a bullet still in you from that experience, and had to leave the country. I mean, what is the situation like out there for Christians such as yourself and those that you've seen supported?
Christian is suffering from actually in the 1947 is still suffering because when we start Pakistan and India is go to separate, right? Christian is still suffering because Christian, he haven't got any power of the vote there. He haven't got any right there. It's not allowed any Christian go to and charge any department there. In the Zia al-Haq Dawr is go to all the Christian properties go to nationalize there, because Christian have got just one way, is go to forward. Because before study study was only good study is in the Christian schools in the Pakistan, right? All the school, when is go to nationalize, that way is go to finish, because all the Christian, if he have got teachers, any other peoples, he's go to job for the schools, college, universities, because have got Christian properties there, and as well hospitals. When is go to everything is nationalized, all the Christian staff is gone, and all the Muslim staff is come to there, and he start work there. It's mean all the way is blocked for the Christian. Christian never go to forward.
So Christians in that
It's
sense
a discrimination
have constantly
issue,
been discriminated against.
Well,
In
not only
terms of
Christians,
governmental law and-
minorities as well.
All the minorities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's some group of extremists.
Do you feel things are getting worse or better currently?
It's better. No, worse.
Worse.
It's going to worse,
Yeah.
not better.
Okay.
If you check the RBT, ARY yesterday, one woman in the maybe north side, also on the TV news, he give to punish 30 time hit to her.
Lashes.
30 lashes.
That for women. Actually, I just know about the news. I don't know about the reality. It's in the news. Have got just problem for the way, because she have got property there. That people want way from there. She didn't give to way,
Right away.
and he charged for.
Well, obviously there are many injustices
That's misusing.
that you're talking about. Adnan, what's your reflection on these cases in Pakistan and the blasphemy law that exists there? Is it in any sense justified to have a blasphemy law? And what about the way that it is actually carried out in Pakistan?
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah, wa ba'd. Justin, thank you very much for inviting me to another interesting interaction with my friends, with me, John and Stuart. I kind of agree with them both. Christians are heavily persecuted, mistreated in Pakistan. I have experienced myself personally some of the Christians. Having spoken to some of the Christians in Pakistan, I've come across their difficulties as they put them to me. To cite one example, I was with a taxi driver who was a Christian, who happened to be a Christian, and I spoke to him in detail about how he likes to be in Pakistan, and he wasn't very happy, and I asked him the reason, and he actually explained to me the kind of treatment which the Christians receive in general, or discrimination against them because of the status they have, the untouchables. And even in this particular case, Asia Bibi's case, that when the whole thing escalated because she offered water to someone and someone refused water because she was deemed untouchable. This is obnoxious. This is pure ignorance about the rules and laws of Islam as well. I mean, you gave me water today just outside, and I took it from you and I drank it, and here we have an empty cup. So this is pure ignorance. It's got nothing to do with Islam in that sense. Asia Bibi's case is one of the cases which is an exception in the sense that this is the first case whereby we find someone sentenced to death. And even if she was guilty of insulting the Prophet, which is a law in Islam, there is no doubt about that. Islamic law states very clearly that anyone who insults the Prophet insults, not criticizes him, because criticism is allowed. I will cite some examples in due course from the history of Islam as well. Criticism is perfectly allowed as long as it's put in decent language, which is acceptable. But when it comes to insulting the Prophet, it is not allowed in an Islamic state if it's governed by Islamic laws. As far as Pakistan is concerned, Pakistan is not an Islamic state. Pakistan is a secular country governed by secular law, and there are some legal codes adopted from the Sharia law, and they have been implemented at will. So as far as the Islamic law is concerned in Pakistan, it doesn't exist in its totality. This is why the Christians are suffering. My contention is the Christians are suffering in Pakistan because there is no legal system which is effective enough to govern the affairs of the Christians. I believe the Christians were living as dhimmis, in Pakistan, they would have been treated much better than they are treated today.
That's an interesting point of view. I mean, it'd be interesting to ask then, what is the difference between criticising the Prophet and disrespecting or insulting the Prophet? Is there a law under Islam that is justified to punish those who actually insult the Prophet?
Yes, absolutely. I just stated that there is definitely a law.
And what would the appropriate punishment be?
Okay, it carries capital punishment. It is a law. That's how it stands, and it is well established within the Islamic legal schools that anyone who insults the Prophet, whether Muslim or a non-Muslim, no matter who insults the Prophet, a king or a pauper, it doesn't really matter. Anyone who insults the Prophet in a way which is extremely derogatory, then the penalty is death if it's proven and the person insists to stand by the statement made whenever it was made.
And that's based on the Quran and the Hadith? The
Quran and the Hadith both, yes.
So that you feel is legitimate to have, but that's under an Islamic state. You'd say that in this case of a secular state.
And there's a clarification to be made here that there is no justification of mob violence in Islam. There is no jungle justice in Islam. If there is someone who is being accused of blaspheming the Prophet or insulting the Prophet, the case must be taken to the court, to the Islamic court where the Qadi resides. Qadi listens to the case, and the way I understand these cases is that the Qadi listens to the accused and asks him or her to repent. And if the person retracts, then the person is simply allowed to go away, because the case of blasphemy is simply based upon accusations by others. And in this case, it seems to be personal vendetta, as you put it. And if someone comes up with this accusation against some person, it can be easily established in the court whether the person ever blasphemed or not by simply restating or retracting from the statement made.
I mean, it raises the question then, Stuart, what constitutes a blasphemy? Because as I understand it, what Asiya is supposed to have said is that they entered a conversation about where her co-workers asked, what has Jesus ever done for you, sort of thing, to which she responded, well, he's my saviour, etc. What has Muhammad ever done for you? And that has been used as the basis for this being the blasphemy in question. I mean, is the problem here that, regardless of whether Pakistan should be implementing a blasphemy law under its constitution, that the issue of what constitutes a blasphemy is very elastic in that sense? It
is, and it's really elastic. And I'm very glad to hear some of the things that Adnan has said. There are several issues here. First of all, unfortunately, in Pakistan, apostasy is deemed as blasphemy against the Prophet. When a Muslim converts, for instance, to Christianity, that is deemed as a blasphemy against Muhammad, because the person has turned their back on the Prophet of their religion. And then generally what happens is a family then feels, with the Mullah's sanction, Mulvani's sanction, to take action, and generally what happens is there will be an attempt, or they will kill the apostate. So blasphemy in a country like Pakistan can be very wide. It can be saying something derogatory or alleged to have said, or even, as we said, apostasy. There's no law against apostasy in Pakistan in the statute books, but there've been many cases of apostates being killed by family members, and we've been involved with cases like that simply because they've turned their back on the Prophet. So it is elastic. It's a wide definition, but our contention is this: in Pakistan, if we over the years we have tried to work with our friends in Pakistan, including the Human Rights Commission in Pakistan, which is chaired by a Muslim, very eminent Muslim journalist, to try and make it so that a senior policeman has to verify and authorise a first information report. Because if it's done at a senior level, then a lot of the cases would have got no further. They wouldn't have been even listed or heard. The problem is it's done at low level by people who are not are just not aware of what happens in the world, and so these 1,000 cases we've had have gone and have taken place when there could have been a way in the procedure of stopping that, and that's what we try to do. So we stand for repeal of these laws, or if we can't get that, at least amendment to make it so that that many of these cases, which are just settlement of personal scores, but they've been with grocers, with neighbours. Many of them are land disputes.
Yeah. I mean, it appears that obviously Adnan agrees with you, John, in your assessment that most of these cases are settling vendettas and really shouldn't constitute anything that you could call insulting of the Prophet Muhammad. But what do you make of Adnan's belief, John, that those who do genuinely insult the Prophet Muhammad should be put to death under an Islamic state? Do you see that as incompatible with, if you like, freedom of expression to, freedom of speech?
That's wrong. Yeah. That's wrong. I believe that's wrong.
Yeah.
To insult the Prophet is wrong.
But, number one, if all the religion is go to same position, that's better. If it's just for the Prophet of the Muhammad, not Prophet of the Jesus, not Prophet of the other religions, that's wrong.
I think
that's a valid point.
Yeah.
Because
again,
I've got one proof.
Sure. Yes.
Aslam Dogar, he's living Lahore in the Shadara. He wrote a lot of time magazine against of the Jesus Christ. I'll go to complain the police station, and he say, no, you go to DC office. He first give to order, take a order, then I'll put on the FIR. I'll say, okay, I'll go to DC office. I'll give to that proof of the magazine. This is magazine. And he wrote like this. He say, okay, this paper is go to in the inquiry office. First he decide about the charge. Then you come back after 1 month, 2 months. I'll say, okay. Maybe nearly 6 months, I'll go there. Nothing, any result. When I'll go there, every time he said, oh, I'm waiting for the result, I'm waiting for the result, waiting for the result. After 6 months, when me and some friends go to their DC office and I discuss with him, and he say, okay, I'll check there, what's wrong there, why it's not give to me any order. I'll say, okay. When I'll check there, he say, no, sorry, I lost that magazine. So I haven't got any proof, so I can't do anything.
This is a classic example
because
of
that's for the
injustice.
Jesus Christ. If he say anything is in the
Yes.
Christian, if he is any Christian, do anything wrong, nobody's answer any questions.
Yes.
Straight we go to.
I accept
Police
this.
station.
In Pakistan, this is exactly what's happening. This is exactly what's taking place. As far as the Christians are concerned, as I already put it, they're not treated as equals, or they're not treated with justice. In Islam, as far as Islam stands, we have examples like Umar bin Khattab, the second caliph of Islam. A Christian boy came to him from Egypt and complained to him that a Muslim man hit him on the head because he was the son of the governor of Egypt. And Umar invited the son and the father both and asked the Christian boy to punish the son, the one who struck him, and the father, because the father did not teach his son good enough to how to be a good Muslim. So this is the kind of justice which we are lacking today in Pakistan, to be more precise. I don't think any good Christian wants to insult the Prophet of Islam, or any prophet for that matter. I don't think any Christian wants to go down that road.
Exactly.
And this is where we have to understand this. If someone insults the Prophet by mistake, even in case of Asia Bibi, it was alleged that she accepted that she did insult the Prophet in anger. However, she was sorry. She apologized that if she did it, she was sorry. I believe that apology should have been accepted, because I'll give you an example, historical example. In Cordoba in the 9th century, from the year 850 to 859, there was a movement called the Martyrs Movement, whereby some Christian monks, clergy, deliberately went to the Muslims and insulted the Prophet in their presence, to die as martyrs, to stop the fast or the rapid rate of conversion to Islam, as far as the Christians were concerned. To stop that conversion, they wanted to become martyrs in order to raise the Christian spirit in those days. And the Muslim jurists were facing a very difficult situation here. A lot of the Christians were coming voluntarily, insulting the Prophet in their presence and refusing to retract. And the qadis, the judges, would ask them again and again to retract, to repent, and they would insist on insulting the Prophet. And there were almost 49 people killed in due course from the year 850 to 859. So from this case we learn that Islam doesn't allow freedom to insult any prophet, neither Moses nor Jesus, and even Muhammad, because we considered him to be a prophet of God, together with Jesus, Moses, and Abraham. So Islam doesn't allow freedom to insult any prophet. If someone wants to criticize the prophet in an intelligent way, come together to debate. There is a book in this regard written by Sidney H. Griffith. He's an academic from Australia, and he has written a book titled The Church in the Shadow of the Mosque. In this book he discusses how the Christians were living under the Islamic rule in the history of Islam. And he has given many examples where Christians and Muslims would come together and debate in an intelligent way, in a respectful manner, where the Christians would openly criticize the Prophet or reject him. They would pick up something from the Quran and would say, we don't believe in this is a forgery, this is not real. And the Muslims would take it as criticism, not as an insult, and they would refute it in due course. So this kind of interaction, this kind of discourse is actually, in fact, encouraged. Quran speaks to the Muslims, telling them, go and speak to the people of the book with wisdom and with kindness.
Obviously, we're all in agreement that it's for the sake of religious harmony and getting on and coexistence, blaspheming or criticizing or even insulting really the Prophet Muhammad is a bad idea. But when it does happen, I suppose my question is there any justification in your mind for Islamic states in particular imposing the death penalty on people?
Absolutely not. No, and I'm glad that Adnan raised the issue of Cordoba, because today in Cambridge, I don't know if Adnan knows Sarah Snyder, who we know. She is involved in a move to have dialogue and co-readings of the Quran and the Bible together. And that's happening now at Cambridge, and there are a group of Muslims and Christians doing that together. If we look at countries like Pakistan, Indonesia, Sudan, all the countries, or Nigeria, northern Nigeria, where there is persecution of Christians, discrimination because they're a minority, if we can't have meaningful dialogue, then there's no hope for these countries. We've got to be able to sit down and discuss and dialogue and seek for peace and for people to live in respect and tolerance of each other and their views. Otherwise, in places where there are populations like in northern Nigeria, some of the big cities where I've been to with Baroness Cox, which are at Kano, Jos, Kaduna, where we've got 50% Christians, 50%. If we can't live in dialogue together, then there's no hope for those populations. So we have to do that. I think then we're leading on to the other issues about conventions, the UN Convention and the International Civil and Political Rights Charter. Now, it's interesting enough, Pakistan has just ratified the ICPR, but with reservations. And this is one of the problems with pure Islamic states, like, for instance, Afghanistan, which has partly ratified the ICPR, but where national law will have priority over international protocols. That's an issue. And when Baroness Cox and I have sat down with mullahs in Kano and Kaduna and said, look, what Sharia law is really against the UN Convention on Human Rights, because people should be free to worship which way that's Article 18, and also Article 19, to choose their religion to another religion without the coercion of others, we've said Sharia is against the worldwide accepted conventions. Of course, the UN Convention on Human Rights isn't binding if you sign it, but it is a widely accepted convention. And we believe that Sharia in some parts is contrary to accepted convention. And this is an issue. And the mullahs we've spoken to in Africa have said, well, we Muslims in Africa have our own definition of human rights, which would include the right to live under Sharia. While Christians in Nigeria have said, just not to bring in Nigeria, but have said, well, we can't live under Sharia. And the imams and the mullahs have said, well, you have to trust us. The trouble is they can't trust them. That's the issue.
And in a sense, however civil a dialogue may be, if there is a danger that someone will interpret your words as insulting and that carries the death penalty, it's very hard, in a sense, not to feel, in some sense, worried for your safety if you are trying to kind of engage seriously, as you say, with the issues, Adnan. I mean, is this a problem that as long as there is any kind of death threats involved in Islamic law as regards what you say about the Prophet Muhammad, that people are going to feel that these could easily be used against me? I could, my criticism could easily be seen as an insult, and
that's a good point. It's funny that Stuart mentions Snyder. I had a dialogue exactly the one you advocated. Yes, yeah. Exactly. I had a dialogue with her a couple of weeks ago. She's an amazing woman, and we have agreed to work in the future on the same project she's working on. So I am already part of that project. Sarah Snyder is part of. I do advocate similar interactions between Muslims and Christians and Jews and atheists for all people to come together and at the same time being able to converse with each other with respect and dignity. Coming back to the issue of being able to criticize the Prophet and not
fear that your words will be taken
out of context
as an insult.
This is where the courts come in. Even if as the Islamic law stands today, as I speak to you, even if someone insults the Prophet by mistake, once the case gets to the court, the judge decides whether this was an insult or not, because judge simply turns around and asks the accused whether he or she intended to insult the Prophet. And if the person simply refuses to admit any guilt on his or her part, then the judge simply lets the person go. So this is how simple the Islamic law is, and this is exactly what happened in Cordoba. In Cordoba, in Maliki,
they were given repeatedly, you say, the chance to
absolutely, and this is confirmed by Cooper.
To withdraw there.
There's a book called Martyrs of Cordoba, written by Cooper, published by Nebraska University Press, and if you read the book, you'll get all these details.
You look like you want to respond.
Well, I was just going to say that's great, and but even the poor judges in Pakistan have an issue. Now, in the case that John dealt with, in 1995, February 1995, when Rahmat and Salamat came before Judge Bhatti in the High Court in Lahore, he asked the prosecutors on behalf of the Mulvanis to bring the evidence that the boy and the farmer had actually scribbled the blasphemies. They couldn't. They were actually illiterate. They couldn't read or write, neither of them. Right. And so the judge set them free in 1995. Right. Then John was held by Asma Jianga, a Muslim lawyer, who dealt with the case, and Abid Minto, a Muslim barrister. They felt very strongly against the blasphemy laws. John gave his evidence against the mullahs, and then we had to move him covertly. In 1998, two Muslim extremists walked into Judge Bhatti's office and shot him dead, and left a note saying the reason was he had set the kafirs, the unbelievers, free. Right. So the judiciary in Pakistan have to be very careful when dealing with blasphemy cases. This judge, when this case of Asia comes up, let me ask Adam, would you like to be the judge that deals with it?
Absolutely. Absolutely, and I would simply
Well,
ask,
I would say absolutely not, because
I would simply argue my case with
Yeah.
these people, because if you give in or give up in the face of oppression and injustice, then who will defend justice? So I would simply stand up for Asiya if she is someone who did insult the Prophet, and if she retracts, even if she did insult the Prophet, and if she says she is sorry, she didn't mean to do it, she was angry, she would simply be allowed to go away. This is how this law works. I mean, and this is how the law stands.
Oh, how it should work, at
How it
least.
should work.
I mean, because in
This
practice,
is
I think...
exactly how it works.
it does. But what
The
But
law
the
works in this way. How people practice it
Exactly.
is another story
That-
altogether.
That's the
Yeah.
thing.
Pakistan is a very bad example, unfortunately, of Islamic law and how it's practiced there.
No, there was another case earlier this year. 2 brothers were accused of scribbling blasphemies against the Prophet Muhammad. The police took them into custody. They gave the handwriting to experts to adjudicate, and whilst the experts were adjudicating, Muslim extremists shot the brothers dead
Right.
whilst they were in police custody, 2 Christian brothers. Then the experts said the handwriting wasn't compatible, the guys were innocent. But it's too late, they've been shot dead. And so hundreds and hundreds of people who've been involved in blasphemy cases in Pakistan, Muslims, Christians and Ahmadis, they've had summary judgment dealt against them when they've been innocent.
You're right, Stuart. But to be fair, to bring in another point, in America we have cases where fundamentalist Christians, extremists, have killed Muslims just because of what happened on the day of September the 11th, 9/11.
Well, they killed Christians over the abortion issue.
Exactly.
So I'm not
and
gonna-
Nigeria was another bad example. In Nigeria, both sides are equally guilty of ignorance and bigotry and barbarity. Unfortunately, there is no civilization in that country in that sense. Christians and Muslims are equally behaving in a barbaric manner. Again, we need to come back to the spirit of the golden age of Islam, where people could actually sit down together and converse with each other in a dignified and respectful manner. Sidney H. Griffith, to quote him again, gives an example of 10th century Baghdad, where an Andalusian traveler went to Baghdad and he saw a debate taking place in the city, governed by the Muslims at the time, where atheists, heretics, Christians, Jews, and Muslims sitting together in one place debating.
Sounds a bit like
where
this
the truth
show.
stands. Sorry?
Sounds a bit like
Yeah,
this.
but
program.
I'm going to have to disagree with Adnan over northern Nigeria. Look, we've been there. We know what happens, and unfortunately, Christians do defend themselves when they're being attacked. And this is, Adnan, we've been there to Jos, Kaduna, Bauchi, Maiduguri. There are other issues there. I wouldn't agree with you on what you said there.
If you look at the cases where some of the Christians have been walking into Muslim villages and burning them alive, as the Muslims have been doing the same to them, it's appalling. The point I'm making is it's equally appalling from both sides.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, we could nitpick on which cases are, who's to blame in these instances. But either way, it's a tragedy that the communities are essentially, at war with each other. I suppose I want to get back, though, to the fundamental point, which I think a lot of people listening will be thinking at this point, Adnan. Okay, fine, you're all for mutual dialogue, respectful, and where, in an ideal world, under an Islamic law, people wouldn't be put to death because people would all be civil to each other and be able to respectfully disagree with each other, etc. But people still may have a problem. I have a problem, for instance, with the idea that Islam would put to death those who don't retract an insult of the Prophet, because there's this fundamental issue of freedom of speech. I should be able to do these things.
To insult.
And is it in any sense fair that because I happen to live in an Islamic state that I will therefore be killed? What is the justification for that kind of mode of action?
Okay, if someone wants to commit suicide, we simply cannot help these people. They need to.
They're not asking. They're not. I mean, yes, perhaps in practice, what they're doing is committing suicide, because to do that is to effectively commit suicide.
Because when you
the
insult
question is,
the Prophet,
should that doing that whole, constitute a death
Muslim law,
sentence?
Islamic law or the Quran or the Sunnah of the Prophet or the Prophet himself didn't want to kill people for criticizing him. If someone wants to insult the Prophet and persist in insulting the Prophet, then this is someone who wants to commit suicide in an Islamic state, and the state doesn't allow anyone or any mob or any people to take the law into their own hands. A state governs as a state.
I think the problem that many Christians will have this Adnan, is that we have such a diametrically opposed, different view in Jesus, who took insults and accepted them, but said, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing."
They know not what they're doing.
And to hear of the Prophet of Islam being one who issues the death penalty when people insult him is in a sense so very different to the Christian view that from a Christian point of view, we don't see that is the response to that kind of thing. God will be the ultimate judge. It's not for us to.
It's a very fair point. I mean, if you, as a Christian, you are absolutely allowed to disagree with this law, but if the law is there, if it stands as the law of the land, then as good Christians must abide by it, as the Bible clearly puts it. In the writings of St. Paul, you read it clearly that once you live in a land, you obey the rule. This is how simple it is. In the book of Romans, it's clearly stated there. You obey the rules. You do not go against the rulers. So if there's a caliph governing a land, as good Christians, all of the Christians should obey the law in that sense, and not insult the Prophet. If they want to criticize the Prophet, if they want to defend Christianity, if they want to write works in order to pick faults in Islam, there is nothing wrong with that. They can do that. Christians have been doing that in the past, and they have been doing it successfully. And the Muslims have been responding to them, at the same time criticizing Christianity. And we've had these interactions, and we want to continue with this kind of work. But at the same time, opening a door for insulting others and not respecting anyone's religion, for that matter, is something Islam doesn't allow, doesn't encourage, and doesn't appreciate. At the same time, Islam doesn't allow Moses to be disrespected, or even Jesus. So it's not only about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's not only about the Prophet of Islam. It's about the integrity of the family of the family of all prophets, basically, because they're all brothers in the same religion. This is what we believe in. Jesus, Moses, Abraham, David, Solomon, Muhammad, they came with the same message. So in order for us to preserve the message and maintain the respect of this message, we must preserve the personalities and the credibility of these personalities.
So on that basis, do you think that Pakistan should repeal its blasphemy laws or not?
Pakistan is not an Islamic state. I believe Pakistan having blasphemy laws doesn't
make sense.
Doesn't make sense.
Okay.
It doesn't make sense.
So
because it's not an Islamic state.
It should repeal them.
I want to come back to what Adnan said about the Apostle Paul. Whilst he said that we're subject to the laws and the powers that be, where those laws came into conflict with God and his word, as the Apostle Peter did, he said, when he stood before the Sanhedrin, he said, whether we should obey you or God, for us, we must obey God. And so where there's a conflict between spiritual and biblical, let's say, laws and earthly powers, Paul and Peter always obeyed God. So there is a difference.
And this is the problem, is that in that instance you mentioned...
Sanhedrin was not in power. It were the Romans.
But it was a principle. Peter said, we're not going to obey you, we're under submission to God. So there is sometimes a conflict between earthly powers, earthly governments, and the spiritual authority of God.
That's a valid point.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you look at Paul, what Paul was talking about the Romans, and even Jesus, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and render unto God what is God's.
I agree, but
there is this difference.
There is this difference, and of course...
What if the Caesar is a caliph?
Well...
You give him to him what belongs to
him. But then there would be, for instance, a problem when the conflict comes from biblical issues.
The question is then, of course, what constitutes a blasphemy? Because Jesus was put to death for blasphemy, for saying, I am, the Son of God. But the point is then, would a Muslim, in a particular instance, interpret a Christian saying, I believe Jesus is the Son of God?
Well, that's John 14:6.
And hence committing shirk, against, would that constitute a blasphemy?
We have an example in the Quran where Prophet Muhammad had a debate with the Christians in the mosque of Medina. he's debating the Christians. Christians came from the city of Najran in the south of Mecca, a settlement in the south of Mecca. These people, they came and they challenged the Prophet openly. While he was the ruler, he was the king of Medina, telling him that we simply don't believe in your message. What are you going to do with us? And Quran chapter 3 verse 59 deals with this issue. Prophet was asked by God Almighty to challenge them that bring your families and your children and your daughters, and we will invoke the curse of God for those who are liars.
I'd like to bring in John again at this point. John, you've heard everything that Adnan's had to say and the way he's spelt out how ideally Islamic law should operate here, and that it should allow for free exchange of opinions and disagreements, etc., and that only in the most, if you like, obvious cases where people are deliberately not, giving up their insults, should a death penalty be instituted. But
by the government, by the state.
Okay, but I mean, does that just sound like pie in the sky to you? It's just an imaginary situation, because in fact, when you look at Pakistan and the things people are brought to court for, is it even possible that Adnan's ideal state could exist in any way as an Islamic state?
This is actually hard point. It's not easy to answer for this. It's true. Because if you go to check the Islam is tells something other, but on the country,
on the ground,
people is doing anything different thing.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah,
right.
That's the issue.
Because if you read a book for the Ismail Qureshi, he's an advocate in the Supreme Court, and he was the professor. He read one book. And you know what's wrote there in the book? If somebody's do anything against of the Islam, against of the Muhammad, against of any the religions, God give to him punish, God give to him release. But you must be give to punish to him. That's that book he wrote in the after the Zia al-Haq.
After Zia al-Haq.
And when he's start for that Islamic law in the Pakistan, he was go to in the court appeal for the confirm that everything for the Islamic law. Right. And if you go to the on the Quran side, he said, have got an example from the Muhammad. One lady, when he walked from in the street, he put on rubbish on him.
Absolutely.
And he never give to punish.
Yes.
And so in practice,
but
obviously
in the practice,
this is
everything
different.
Look
again, ignorance. Ignorance with the religion. I mean, there's not these people don't study. The mob, which is usually running around in Pakistan, the thugs who are killing and persecuting Christians and other minorities, are not educated Muslims. They don't know anything about their religion. Someone comes to them and tells them, this person, this Christian, this so-and-so insulted the Prophet, or put the Quran in the rubbish, or something like this. People will just run,
and they just react.
There was a case
state,
recently in Sialkot. Two brothers were accused of carrying out a robbery, and they were killed by a mob.
Sialkot.
Absolutely appalling.
Why is the tension so high in that sense? So why do Muslims on the ground, who unfortunately don't have the benefit of your study and your
they're not enlightened, are they?
It's not only the Muslims.
But why do they respond so aggressively to these stories?
I think it's absolutely unfair to say that. If you go to South America, where we have Christians, if you go to even America, if you go to a place where you will find evangelical Christians, for that matter, if you say the wrong thing in the wrong place, where you have some of the Christians, they will react in the same manner.
They won't go and lynch you.
No.
I mean, they won't.
Well, in Africa, if you're in Africa and in the wrong place at the wrong time, you will be lynched.
I'm
not a
sure that's
Muslim monopoly. It's not a Muslim monopoly.
No.
We find ignorant people in all.
Of course, of course,
religions.
that's true. But there's a difference in the scale of the reaction. Let's say
It's the scale.
when you know, for instance, you know, the well-known cases of the Danish cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad,
Sure.
what the Pope said in a very academic lecture, in fact, but which was, as it were, seized upon by certain Muslim groups, provoked widespread violence, demonstration, death, and it seems out of all proportion to
I think
any
we're
justifiable
dealing with
reaction.
extremists. In that case, for instance, when the cartoons were published, in Maiduguri in northern Nigeria, 27 churches were burnt down and Christians were killed. You know, and that's why when that pastor said he was going to take that action in New York, we, for our brothers and sisters in Africa, had to say, please don't do that. Please don't do that, because Christians are going to suffer all around the world. It's the extremists.
Of course.
The thing is, in Pakistan, one of the problems in Pakistan is the state is unable to protect the minorities.
Yes.
That's one thing.
That's right. Yes.
If the state were better at protecting minorities, if the police gave protection to Christians who were faced with blasphemy charges, we've had them killed in prison. Tariq Iqbal,
right.
who John visited in prison, was a Pakistani airman. He was poisoned to he was facing a blasphemy charge. He was poisoned to death in a police cell. You know. So we're dealing with extremism, and the police are unable to, because they're ignorant, they are unable to protect Christians and others who face.
Given
these charges.
the radical nature of what happens when people do have these reactions to criticism of Islam, which, as you say, Adnan, in your view of Islam, is simply not justified, and any educated Muslim would not take that response. But given that it does happen, and it seems to happen widely in very many places, what is the hope for Islam, as it were, having that sense of a renaissance or some kind of enlightenment, actually with people on the ground, though, you know, who make up the vast majority of Muslims
most of these
in the
people
world?
who react in this way were never governed by Islam in the first place. Pakistan has British law governing its masses. The rest of the Muslim world, if you travel through the Muslim world, you'll see some countries are being governed by French law, American law, and a cocktail of different laws and regulations, including some codes from Sharia as well. So these masses, these mobs, were never governed by Islam. They don't know what Islam looks like. They don't know what Islam tastes like, what it feels like. So once masses or a people have been governed by Islam for a while, they would be educated in an Islamic way, in an intelligent Islamic way. Then they would know how to react. Then they would know who should be reacting, who should be carrying out the penalties, who should be carrying out the proceedings against those who are accused. So in this case, in Pakistan, what happens is, that's put by Stuart quite rightly, that people who are accused, they go to prison and they get killed in prison. Unfortunately, even in case of Asia's punishment, the court has declared the punishment, and there is some guy in Peshawar somewhere.
Mullah.
I don't like the word mullah, by the way, because it's a
Mullah.
very derogatory term. Or maybe, allegedly some cleric has offered some money to kill Asia, even though the court has already declared its verdict. This is obnoxious.
We've talked a lot about the wrongs of the Islamic blasphemy laws in Pakistan, and Adnan, you've agreed in a great deal with actually the assessment of John and Stuart here in the studio of the way it's carried out there. Obviously, you guys disagree on whether any kind of death penalty should be instituted for insulting the Prophet Muhammad, but in any case, in practical terms, given that there is a situation we all agree is not good in Pakistan, what are kind of some of the practical things that could take place, do you think, to bring about change there? I understand you, Stuart, and CSW, Christian Solidarity Worldwide, are working for repeal of these laws.
We have a link with the Minister for Minorities, Shahbaz Bhatti. He's a personal friend of mine, and he has been tasked with looking at the blasphemy laws, and he was preparing a bill to go before the Parliament to repeal the laws. And so we're working for them to be repealed, basically because so many Muslims and Christians have unjustly been killed when they've been innocent and not guilty of the charges that have been made. We accept that probably in this current environment it will be difficult, but we certainly want amendments, and we certainly want to stop these cases going further than the police stations and the policemen, if they were far more enlightened and not ignorant, could stop these cases at the very lowest level and dismiss them. And that would be one thing. But the real issue, I think, is they're unjust. They really are out of context in today's world, where we believe that there should be freedom and democracy, and that people, as Adnan said, should be able to express themselves without insulting. And I don't believe Christians go out of the way, as Adnan said, to insult the Prophet, but we must get rid of these laws.
Where there's always a danger, I suppose, of them being perverted to make the case that there has been an insult. Adnan, do you think Muslims should stand up more against these types of laws as they exist in Pakistan and as they're implemented?
No, I believe Muslims should stand up against the way these laws are practiced in Pakistan, and the way some of the Christians are treated in Pakistan, and other minorities are treated, for that matter.
Would the Hittin Institute advocate for the repealing of the laws in the way that CSW obviously is?
No, Hittin Institute would advocate the implementation of Islam in its totality rather than repealing this law. Just implementing this law and disregarding the rest of Islamic system is not the solution in Pakistan. This is why Pakistan is in the state it is in today. Hittin Institute would advocate that the law of Islam should be implemented in its totality, so that the Christians, the Muslims and the Jews can live together again in peace and experience convivencia.
But Jinnah, who's the father of the Pakistan constitution, never envisaged that, Adnan. He said when he set up the constitution of Pakistan, and let's face it, the Muslim League, when Pakistan was set up, depended on the Christian vote in the Punjab. He said the Jews should be free to go to their places of worship, Hindus should be able to go to their temples, Muslims to their mosques, and Christians to the church.
That's what Islam advocates.
But that's what Jinnah said. He never envisaged.
Well, Jinnah was saying what Islam says in that case, because
but he didn't envisage an Islamic
Islam
state.
defends the right of the minorities to live as they please, worship
but
as they please.
But why can't we go back to the father of Pakistan, who didn't?
Well, in that case, the father of Pakistan is Iqbal, who invited Jinnah in the first place to advocate the case of the Muslims in India. Iqbal was the author of the idea of Pakistan. Iqbal was the man who invited Jinnah, and Iqbal was not a secularist. If you read his poetry and if you read his works, you will come to realize that Iqbal was one of those people who promoted Islam as the solution rather than secularism.
I mean, you obviously feel, Adnan, that in a properly, if you like, constituted Islamic state, these injustices would not happen.
I believe yes. If Islam was
but they do. Look at Saudi.
Well, I was going to say, then
Saudi Arabia,
look at one that is a supposedly.
Saudi Arabia doesn't govern its masses.
Okay, but
Islam
then is there an existence today an Islamic state that you would
not
term
that
as?
I know of, and some of the
how
Western governments would like to see a
How do you know that
model.
any Islamic state would rule with this justice and this harmony that
have
you speak
I ever
of?
seen one?
Well, have you seen it, and how can you even say that it would?
Because
we have historical examples to refer to. For
example,
but
you could point to Indonesia up until 1990.
Well, Indonesia had never governed with Sharia law.
No, it didn't. No, it was a very enlightened, moderate Islamic
but
country.
Presumably that you.
In other words, it's a secular.
Until the Lashkar Jihad set up and then invaded the Moluccas.
In a way, we're starting to tread into the topic that will be next week's programme, which
right.
I think is a good place probably to end this, because we've had a very interesting discussion. Thank you all, gentlemen, for being with me. A lot of agreement, some disagreement, as always, on this programme, but you've all put the case very well. If people want to find out more about what you do, Adnan, and the Hittin Institute, is there somewhere they could look? I know you've got multiple YouTube videos of you in discussion.
Yeah, I watch him on.
Yes, absolutely. Where should they go, Adnan, if they want to find out more?
They can go to the Hittin Institute website, or IERA, Islamic Academy, Islamic Education and Research Academy.
Okay.
They can go on that website and look at my profile there and some other
Well,
videos.
we'll post the links as well
Okay.
with this podcast. So thanks, gentlemen, all, for being with me.